welcome everyone. Thank you for being here. I have a guest here today, Sheryl. She's my first podcast guest. She's president of the UFO Research Group in Queensland.
That's right, yep, in Brisbane.
So, could you just tell me a little bit about yourself and your background, Sheryl?
Sure. Where do I start? I just want to, let's see. Well, I've always had an interest in the UFO subject since I was I used to say since I was a teenager, but now I sort of look back and go, well, since I was a kid, but I didn't really know that's what it was, because I used to look out at the night sky and wonder if there was life on other planets out there, looking back at Earth, wondering if there's life on other planets out there. So, so it was a bit of I guess you could say it was in my nature to wonder on those things. And then when I became a teenager and I could earn a bit of pocket money, etc., I would buy a magazine, which is no longer current now, probably precedes most magazines in Australia that you might see, called the Australasian Post. Now, this is in the 70s. And so I used to buy that when it came out. And in there it was just full of paranormal stories. And there was a wonderful gentleman who's no longer with us now called John Pinkney. So I want to pay homage to him because he gathered a lot of information that I was reading in that magazine. Anyway, and then as I got older, my interests, weaved amongst, getting married, buying my first house, having a child, all that sort of stuff. It sort of went on from there to into UFOs and the paranormal, and probably prompted by a very sincere and deeply meaningful personal search for God in my 20s, which brought me to the Bible, which then brought me to the descriptions of angelic visitations, which then got me thinking, are these really angelic visitations, or is this alien contact that we're reading about? And it just went from there.
Okay, so that's pretty interesting. That magazine, I don't know if many people really read magazines nowadays, but was it quite popular back then?
Yes, it was.
Well,
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and there were all sorts of weird and wonderful things in there. I mean, it might be equivalent to what I think Weird World is like, or
I don't know that one. Is that still a thing?
I don't think that is either. It's all before your time.
Check it out. That's okay.
You might find it on the Wayback Machine somewhere, that website, which looks into oh no, there was no website, but yeah, there's interesting times, early days of paranormal publications in Australia, very early days.
Okay, and did it also have like UFO and that sort of phenomena, or was it?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and because in the 60s we had the 1966 we had the Tully saucer nests, which were appearing up in Queensland, and so that things I was seeing images of swirled reeds on people's property, where UFOs had landed or been, and all those sorts of things that for us now it's all history, but at the time, it was in the early days when those things were just going out to the public.
Okay, just quickly, what do you think of the nest? There were like crop circles. I sort of read it briefly on the website. What do you think about crop circles? Do you think that like some are man-made, or is it quite muddy, the waters within the community as to the stance on them?
Well, I've been following the crop circles since we hosted someone here in Brisbane in 1990. That was the first time I had actually seen photographs that someone had taken of the crop circles, and who actually became a good friend of mine. She was living in the UK at the time. And the early days, there was a genuine phenomenon, I feel,
Hmm.
But as time went on and the formations became more elaborate, crop circle researchers started to say, oh, 80% of these are man-made. And I started to think that myself, But I was following the work of a woman called Nancy Talbot with the BLT research team over in the States. And they were finding anomalies in some of these formations, like small magnetic metal balls, very small, were being found in the formation. And yes, if it was a hoax, someone could sprinkle those through the formation. That's possible. But other crop circle researchers like Colin Andrews, who's very well known in that community, he is responsible for bringing many of those images to the public attention. He was taking photographs where the stalks of the plants were being bent. They weren't broken. They were just being bent at the nodes on the plant, and they were being as if they were being heat treated at immense heats, and the nodes were popping open. So they were being bent over, sometimes at a 90-degree angle. So there were certain things about crop circles that I think that some of them were very genuine, but what they were, I don't know. It's very hard it's one thing to sort of lay down crops. I've done it myself in very long wild grass just to see how I could make one.
Yeah.
But it's another thing to create these tangential effects where the bending of the plant, rises, is on an angle, and it rises through the crop itself. That's really hard to hoax.
Okay, like you need a large object to sort of just rest on it, as opposed to like a sheath that would clear the patch.
No, what I mean is when the crops are made, they're made. You can see them because the crop is bent over, but there are some formations that have this really unusual thing about them where the bending of the stalk of the plant goes on a rise incrementally with each plant. So you get this sort of rising up of the pattern within the crop with each particular plant. So that's what I mean by that tangential effect. You just can't do it. It's very hard to do. It's like getting a fist and pushing it down into the crop, and some of them the crop will be flat down here, but as you go up around your fist, some of them will stand up and further and further, and some will be straight. So it's really hard to create that. So that's, for me, the jury's still out on some of them.
Yeah. That's understandable. And I don't know awfully a lot about crop circles, but in some cases when there's been other things like radioactive levels reported near some, I don't think someone would be sprinkling like plutonium or uranium to add to it. They could, but I don't think that wouldn't be very safe for access to that. Yeah, it doesn't seem.
And it's also like some of those crops where the crystalline structure of the plant was changed too, so you can't negate that either.
As in, like the crystalline structure, like the cells within the plant. Oh, okay. Like they were changed. I don't know, by like, do they know what usually changes a crystalline structure?
Look, I couldn't tell you. That's been a long time since I've looked at crop circles in that way. But I certainly would encourage people to go look at the work of Colin Andrews on his website. I think it's
I'll write that down too.
But just look up Colin Andrews crop circles, and all that information will be there.
Yeah, of course. I guess like the history of to be expected of crop circles would, in the beginning, like UFO phenomena, like there may have been some genuine unexplained observations, but like in the first instance of the crop circle, like people just started to fake them for, I don't know, publicity and certain things. But I'd like to just understand, how did you come to get started with the group that you're in now?
Right. Well, to finish off that story before, when I was doing that search for God and made the leap from angels to aliens, that's when my husband at the time contacted the organisation, and we knew the organisation existed because it turns out that my father-in-law had been a member many, many years ago. So our interests sort of merged with that. And when our interest came to light with him, he said, "Oh, I used to go to the UFO meeting in Brisbane, you know, in the, I don't know, the 60s, I think it was, or something like that, late 60s, I think it was." And he, so he sort of pointed us in that direction. We looked it up and went along to a meeting. It happened to be the AGM that night, and the committee stood down and we said, "Yes, we'll join." And man, what a ride it's been since. Husband and I, we were involved together for 21 years before he passed away 5 years ago. But and deeply interested in the subject, you know. So he sort of, I was very much interested in the nuts and bolts, the stories, the details, you know, what's the shape, the speed, the direction, the this and that, the craft.
Yeah.
But you know, he had been in the subject for longer than me, and sort of got me to think more about, through his own interests, more about who was driving the damn things. You know, where were they from? What were they doing here? What do they want? You know, like, what's that all about? And how does that fit in with human spirituality, if at all? All those sort of other questions. You know, what does this mean to humanity to be part of a cosmic neighborhood that, you know, that is a universe teeming with life, and you know, and we've been living on the planet all this time with our head in the sand, not even realizing it. That's like living in your house and not acknowledging that you've got neighbors in the street. You know, it's just crazy.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. In that case, maybe you can't see your neighbors too often, but
True.
a little bit hard to spot sometimes. Okay, that's interesting. So back then, sorry, how long have you been involved with the UFO research? Yeah,
since 1988, so it's 32 years.
Okay, and well, I think you have a good understanding. How has it changed? Has the group, has the interest level of like people joining, has it grown or has it sort of declined over the years? What's the activity been?
It's up and down. When I got involved in 1988, we had 40 members.
Okay.
By mid-90s, we had over 300.
Wow.
And then it dropped off again. But that's probably to do with the emergence of the internet. And suddenly people could actually access a whole lot of knowledge they didn't need to get from UFO organizations anymore. In fact, they could go directly to the authors of the classic books and have a conversation with them. So, and you know, then Facebook came along and that changed the whole scene again. And I don't think it changed it in a positive way either. It sort of decentralized the collection of information. So UFO organizations that would actually historically collect UFO reports and put them in a database and add them to a record that can be kept for future generations.
Yes.
They slowly closed down because the people who'd been doing that, they either died or they left the field. And then we have these younger people who pop up and create Facebook pages where people can post reports, but they don't get logged. So in a way, it's, you know, it's diffusing our understanding of the activity that's going on.
Yeah, and I guess also, like you said, it seemed like there's a bit of decline with the introduction of the internet. Maybe back when you'd have groups and you'd meet or you'd meet more frequently than I imagine people would now, because it's just easier to message and communicate over the internet. But back then, you could potentially you could get a gist for people a little bit better if they're reporting something. Maybe you can get a better understanding about their character. If I don't know how much that would play into it, but I feel like it would, because if you get a certain feeling from someone that's telling a story versus just a text post and a picture, you can
Yeah, certainly. And that's very true. And, I can spend 2 hours on the phone with someone who's ringing up to say, hey, I need to tell someone something before I die,
okay.
or I'm not,
Wow.
I don't want to talk to my family about this, but I really need to talk to someone. Will you listen? Yeah, sure. And yes, you can, sometimes it's a really strange thing receiving a UFO report from the public, because initially the mind goes, if it's a bit too way out, the mind goes, close this down. This person's making it up. But over the
Yeah.
years, I've had to learn to overcome that hurdle and keep my mind open, regardless of how I imagine the person on the other end of the phone is, because of the very strange nature of the phenomenon itself. So something that 20 years ago, I might have thought, oh, this is a load of garbage. This person is making this up. This is science fiction.
Yeah.
Today, I know, actually, it's not like that at all. And a lot of those cases that I might have discarded 20 years ago probably had some sort of relevance. But, there's no university about UFO research. It's learn as you go. It's, you hit the floor running when you decide to be a UFO researcher, and you've got to catch up, and there's a lot to catch up, and there's a lot we still don't know.
Yeah. And getting back to those communities that would archive the reports and everything, would another reason that they stopped existing, I don't know if they exist, was it funding though, or was that quite a large component for those groups to exist?
No, there's
Oh,
never
okay.
been any funding. Any
Okay.
funding that we have, because our organisation still documents reports, we actually have a database on our website where people can actually send in reports, and they'll go straight into the database. Funding was never an issue. In fact, if members or committees of the organisations didn't fund most of the costs themselves, those groups might have stopped existing, because in those days someone had to pay for photocopying the old hard print newsletters and the mail outs. And I can remember my dining room table just covered in envelopes. And we used to have a get together, and when we'd put the journal together, our bi-monthly journal, which still exists, and it's all the labeling, the folding, anyway, so that was good, but
Yeah.
I'm glad it's over, because now we do it all digitally, which is a lot
Yeah.
easier.
Yeah.
So there were a lot of times that most of the time funding, our cost was not met by membership fees. Fortunately, it is today,
Okay.
but in days gone by, no.
All right. Are you able to disclose how many members you actually do have for? Yeah.
Yeah, we've got around about 100 now.
Okay.
It
That's a
wouldn't be over.
significant.
It might be somewhere between 95 and 100, I think.
Wow. Okay. Okay. And do you do this full time? I don't think I asked that.
Well, I have.
Okay.
I mean, everyone that I've ever worked with in this group has always had a job, so you've
Okay.
got to balance this passion, this crazy, insane passion that you have for the subject with earning a living.
Yeah.
So yeah, no one's ever been paid for doing what they do. There's no paid jobs in UFO organizations, except I believe in Sweden that there is an organization that has 2 part-time staff members. But
Wow.
that's
Okay.
about.
Like for a center of
Yeah.
UFO anomaly. Okay. Do you know if it's part of an academic group or is it just a standalone?
It's not, no.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, it's an independent group. Yeah, but
Yeah.
they've been UFO archives. I can't think of the other name, but one of the things they do is they also collect all the UFO publications from all the organisations around the world and create a UFO archive. So, and for years we were sending our hard print journals to them. We now send our digital copies. So that there is some sort of, historical archive of the work that people have done.
Okay. That's I can imagine hard copy would be nice. Was that just like a professional sort of way to communicate, just sending them a hard copy, or was this something that was also published for members to have?
Yeah, both. Yeah.
Okay.
First and foremost for members.
Okay.
We keep them informed, and we still do on our Facebook page and in our journal of the reports that come in, because it's really important to get those reports out to the public because we don't own them. People who have the experiences, they share them with us and we get them out as quickly as possible to the public as well, so they can decide for themselves what's going on.
Okay. When you're cataloging those reports, do you go through them and filter them at all? Is that, do you think it's necessary? Or, I mean, I can only imagine it would be near impossible to sort of decipher which should be included and which shouldn't.
Yeah, that's difficult. One of the things we get these days is that people will send us a photograph and they've taken it on their smartphone. And it's a black screen with a white dot in it and say, what is this? I don't know, it's a black screen with a white dot in it. I can't tell what that is. You know, it could be anything. So, there's, we don't bother following up on those. If they send us footage, it's good. But if anyone is taking photographs of what they think might be a UFO, it's really important, or footage, it's really important to get something else in the photograph that is static, like a tree, the corner of a roof of a house, or a fence, or a telephone pole, something like that. So that if it's footage, we can at least do a comparison of some sort of comparative analysis in relation to the speed that it's going, the direction that it's moving, and the height, how it moves, how it reflects light, all those sorts of things in relation to something that's static in the footage. Mm-hmm. But I mean, years ago we used to go out and investigate a lot more, because particularly during the 1990s, because we had that huge influx of alien abduction reports. So, and I mean, I spent 10 years on the phone. That's what it was like. You know, my daughter was not happy with me in those years. You know, it was just, there was so much going on. It was like the height of the abduction phenomenon. And with, you know, we had thousands of reports come to us. And not just our organisation, but within Australia and all around the planet. It wasn't just UFO Research Queensland, it was all UFO organisations, and independent researchers were receiving those reports of people being, you know, taken on board a craft against their will, having medical procedures done on them, all those sorts of things, in some cases having horrible experiences there, and then being brought back. I was dealing with a lot of people who were traumatized, had post-traumatic stress disorder. And in 92, we started a support group for those people to come together at my home, and right where I'm sitting actually, and get together and talk about their experiences with other people who'd had their experiences too, so that they could get some sort of, know that they weren't alone, and they felt validated, even if they couldn't get that validation from their family and friends.
Yeah, that's understandable. I mean, that's interesting. With that large influx of reports in the 90s, was it sparked by anything? Like, did you correlate any other event that may have prompted that? Yeah.
Well, there were some people, skeptics, who said that because of all the alien-related TV shows that were on TV during the 90s, and, Dark Skies, look, I won't go into it, there were so many, X-Files, all those sorts
Oh,
of
yeah.
things,
Yeah.
that that people were imagining. They were projecting these things into their environment. They were making it up. They wanted to get the 15 minutes of fame, blah, blah, blah. Well, that was a load of garbage. I mean, I might have found 2 people like that out of all the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people that I spoke to. But
Wow.
in the main, it was people who, and remember, this is before the internet really caught on. Like 1992 was a very different time to 2020. So there were people who hadn't even read UFO books, but they certainly weren't tapping into getting these stories from the internet per se, because a lot of them didn't even have computers, until the mid-90s. And hooking up to the internet. And there wasn't a whole lot of information on the internet at that time about these sorts of experiences.
Yeah.
So I would get people who would either come here or talk to me on the phone and say, I've had this really strange experience. And they would describe something to me that I'd heard dozens of times, that week. And I'd say, well, you're not alone. Other people are reporting these types of experiences. And they go, really? They didn't know that other people were having these experiences. We weren't flooded with this information publicly like we are now.
Yeah.
So, the whole idea that, that the alien abduction phenomenon arose from, pop culture in the 90s, I just don't believe it, because these experiences were going on well before that. And even though there had been some Hollywood movies, not many, about, well, there were a few, about, aliens coming and impregnating women from Earth and or taking them away somewhere. I mean, yes, that's true, but but for it to all come to the fruition in the 90s, for some reason, it doesn't explain things. And since then, the phenomenon has dropped off immensely. So we don't get those reports now. So some people suggest, and these are contactees themselves, who say that those abducting aliens were actually driven off, chased away, or told to leave by other alien races who were here in some way trying to protect humanity. Weren't doing a very good job, but we're trying to stave off these types of experiences, or at least turning up later and trying to heal the damage from those abducting aliens, or what some might call that. So, yeah, it's a very big story that's been going on for a very long time.
Okay. So you're saying that there might have been 2 kinds of aliens, and one had a bad intent and the other intervened. Okay. Is that...
Yeah.
I mean,
that's a possibility.
Yeah. That's interesting. Well, I guess, yeah, I mean, if they're abducting people and it's a stressful encounter for some, then maybe the more neutral kind would see that it's stressful for some people that are having those experiences. But do you think that, did you ever think that some of these, I know you said there were very few which you were skeptical of, but did you ever think that some of these reports could be coordinated between people, just to say, oh, we'll both say this and we'll report it?
On that point, what I'd like to point out to your viewers is that any UFO organization, but any organization, is like a hub, and it can be used. So information can be dropped into that community, and it can to head that community in certain directions. We always have to be alert to that. That's why we don't always go public with everything that we're told. So yes, there's definitely room for that. Yeah. But for it to happen in UFO organizations all around the world, that's a lot of work for someone to organize. And even if it was military or some other organization that tried to do that, that's an awful lot of people power to do that too. So that doesn't hold water with me.
Okay. That's
and for it to go on weekly, daily and weekly, yearly for 10 years, that's an awful lot of energy to put into something like that.
Yeah, so certainly. I mean, do you also think that maybe it was the confidence that people might have got in the 90s for the increased reports? Maybe many people had seen phenomena years back, whenever, but they just sort of kept it on the down low, and then it was just a snowball effect of, oh, I'm not the only one seeing it. Do you think it was largely to that?
That's a possibility, but the cases of people coming forward at that time, they had been occurring in their life, and from a young age. So yeah, that's a possibility, and we even get that today. I still get people calling me quite often, actually, strange, not unusually, through these pandemic restrictions, who are reaching out with historical reports, because I think that what happens is that people have experiences and they remain unresolved in their minds and in their psyche and in their soul. Yeah. And they rattle around inside them, and through these restrictions they have been bottled up. They've been, banging on the chain there and saying, pay attention. Whereas before, if they were going to work, they're trying to pay off a mortgage and all that sort of stuff, it just sort of gets pushed to the back all the time. Yeah. So yes, there's certainly that element for sure. But there were a lot of people who are coming forward saying, this is happening to me now. Even though it had been happening in the past when they were young, it was also happening to them right now when they were talking to me. This is happening last week, last month, etc. So yes, I think it's really good when people report things and do it publicly, because it gives other people permission to come forward. It changes the emotional receptivity of the climate at the time, so that, people can come forward and talk about those things, just like, in the church or that sort of thing, where when one person comes forward, it gives other people permission to come forward and say, hey, I've been treated badly by this head in the priesthood or something like that. So, and a lot of things come out then. That's the way it happens. Yeah, yeah, certainly. Actually, no, I want to just down that topic. You said these people are reporting it's happening frequently, or it's a recurring event. When you meet these people, I don't know if it's over the phone or however it is, but these people, do you think, or do they say they're thinking about this all the time? If they have one event in their life, it's I'm sure it's significant, and they'll never know, they may never get closure on what it was, but does it dominate a large part of their life? Do some people just, yes, in a word, yes, because it was unusual to find people who just had one experience.
Okay.
Their experience would be intertwined with UFO sightings that they'd had most of their life. Whether they were, they were multiple witnesses. They witnessed multiple events, I should say. And that's one indicator that there's something else going on there, not just seeing UFOs, right? And the other thing is that, they typically said in those days anyway, that they'd be aware of a little man as a young child. There'd be some sort of little being that'd be in the background, or they'd make friends with him, what their parents thought had an invisible friend, or those sorts of things. And particularly there was one case I remember distinctly, because I met this lady in a park one day. She had a lot of kids, and but she was concerned mostly about her youngest, who had started saying, "Mummy, there's men who come in through the window at night and they take me out and take me away." Now, the mother had had her own experiences back in the UK when she was living there, and the woman's sister had experiences too. So this mother was worried about what might be going on with her child. So there's a lot of these generational chains in families too, that go on for years and years and years. Grandparents, parents, themselves, their children. When it happens to them, their children, that's when they would really reach out and say, "I'm worried about this now. It's been going on in my life. My parents have talked about it occasionally, but now it's affecting my kids and I want it to stop." That's what I was dealing with in the 90s. So how do you stop that? But I forgot what your question was. What was it?
Oh no, yeah, no, that's really good. It was, when people have an experience like this, does it dominate? Does their life become about it? Really?
Yes. It's something like this, which is beyond the range of normal human experience, is a catalyst to take you on a quest to understand what the hell's going on in your life, and what the hell's going on in the world. I used to be faced with a lot of people who are angry about it. Why isn't the ASIO or the FBI doing something about this, stopping these aliens coming to the planet and taking people away, taking my family away? Why isn't that happening? Why is it on the 6 o'clock news? Those sorts of things. Always pounded with those questions, and there'd be a lot of anger about what was going on. So this really touched people deeply. And then add to that they didn't feel safe sleeping at night. Many of them there's one guy slept with an axe under his bed. Few people I knew had knives under their mattress, guns, that they didn't know what was going on. It was really freaking them out. So, and they were waiting for these beings to come in the night. And there's a book called Intruders in the Night, that were coming to get them. And they couldn't sleep. They couldn't relax. They felt like they were going crazy, because their understanding of reality was no longer what it was before these experiences started. And even though they may have had some experiences as a child, they could live with that because that was a while ago. But then it started happening, because what typically happened was the experiences would start in early childhood, then they'd go on then they'd be aware of them in their very early teens, 12, 13. Then they become more aware of it in their around late teens, 20, 21, then in their 30s. And then that's when they start to go, "Hey, wait a minute, something's going on here." When I sit and I think about all the things that have gone on in my life previous to this point, then I think there's something else going on. And that's when they contact me, they tell me their story, and then I say, "Have any other members of your family reported these things too?" Because that's when their eyes really open up and they realize that it's a family thing. And they would say things like, "Oh yes, my mother," had someone recently said, "My mother and father had an experience when I was a kid of this UFO pacing in the car for some phenomenal amount of kilometres, and when they got home, and it lit up inside the car." Which is what often people report. It just lights it up really brightly. Followed them home. The next day, the mother rang the RAAF, and the police reported it. There was nothing in the air at the time. La, 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 we've heard that before, and nothing ever came of it. But so, these are the stories that you get from people. I remember my parents telling me this story when they were younger, that sort of thing. So yeah, it's a very big story.
Yeah, yeah. I know it's a touchy thing to sort of bring up for some people, but do you think, and like I'd be skeptical as well, because if they're not one-off, but not everyday occurrences, or not weekly occurrences, the implication of mental health related things that may exacerbate it, or may, yeah, I don't know how. Did you ever see? Did that affect your perception of it largely with the reports that people would give?
Put it this way: I grew up with someone with mental health in the family, mental
Mm-hmm.
health problems. So I was pretty. I'd had that firsthand experience, even though I hadn't been trained as a professional, as a mental health professional.
Yeah.
So I would, when someone starts to say things to you like, I can contact the aliens and I can ask them questions on your behalf.
Mm-hmm.
That's when you go, this is a messianic sort of syndrome coming up, or they're the savior of the planet, or they have all the answers, and they've been in communication with ETs for a long time, and and they've said that I've got to tell the world about this. I mean, that you go, okay, I'm not really sure what's going on there, but I still, even though people have mental health problems,
yeah,
I still have had to train myself to get past that, because we don't know what caused that mental health in the first place. So, it's a chicken and the egg thing. Were they mentally unwell before the experience, or did the experience create mental ill health?
and of
Which
course,
I'm sure happens too.
Yeah, of course. I mean, just an example like PTSD, where people can be completely fine and an event actually causes a mental health condition. Like, there's many, but that's really interesting.
There's been so many credible witnesses, and that's not to say that credible people can't have those mental health problems too, but this is not mental health illness. We've had people like Dr. John Mack, who was the professor of at Harvard School of Medicine, and he was, I think he was a psychiatrist, psychologist. I can't remember now. It's been so long since I've quoted him, but he was nearly thrown out of Harvard Medical School because of his interest in the subject, and that he was starting to treat people and pay attention to people who reported alien abduction experiences, close encounters, contact, etc.
Mm-hmm.
But he found he could not pick up any sort of, mental ill health problems in the people who were coming forward. He said that they were just ordinary people who'd had extraordinary experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the only way he could explain. He could not pick up any sort of any problems there.
Okay, that adds some more information to it. That's interesting. Do you think that maybe the drop off in reports only to the, well, like the drop off in the reports in recent years for the people that were fibbing, maybe it's because there's more entertaining things now, and also I'd say it's harder to get your 15 minutes of fame nowadays, because there's so much there's just so much content that you'd have to stand apart from on the internet.
There's some researchers who will say that UFO sightings, for example, there's a heck of a lot more now than there used to be. There may be, but we're not getting them. And again, I put that down to social media diffusing the gathering of those reports, so we don't really know whether they're increasing or decreasing. All I can say is our organisation isn't receiving as many, anywhere near as many reports as we used to. Having said that, though, the phenomenon itself evolves. There are times when there are certain types of reports. There are times when there are a lot of reports. There are times when there's a lull in reports. And it changes. It's not static. It changes. So again, you know, we have to take that into consideration as well. In the 50s and 60s, we had a lot of people talking about contactees, talking about space brothers visiting Earth. They're our brothers and they were here to help us. And when we started splitting the atom and creating the atomic bomb and all that sort of thing, that's when they came here and said, oh, you must stop that. Because it's not only affecting your planet, it's going out into the solar system, all those sorts of things. And I do remember reading that at one stage, when some bombs were going off here, the volcanoes on Mars were erupting. I'm not sure how they knew that, but there you go. So, and don't take me at my word for that. People will have to look into that. So, but that was the 50s and 60s. And then after that, the alien abductions started appearing. With the Betty and Barney Hill case, and then we had then it sort of progressed more and more into the alien abduction experiences. And then around 2000 things changed again because scientists changed their mind. They went from we are alone in the universe, always have been alone and always will be alone, to maybe it's possible there is life out there in the universe, to well, it's highly probable that we are not alone, to now discovering water on other planets, which where there's water, we think that there's life, although I think life can exist without that. But, you know, I'm not a scientist. When it comes to alien life, we really don't know what can and can't exist. So, and around the same time, around 2000, the public changed its mind as well to reflect the scientific change of direction. So now we have this whole field of exoplanets where science, where researchers are now suggesting, I just saw this week that they discovered 2 planets that were even more habitable than Earth. It would be better for us to live there. So, things are changing. It's always evolving, and the phenomenon changes with us. Our perspective of it changes. So we ask different questions from decade to decade, year to year, make new discoveries, and start thinking outside the box a bit more.
Yeah. Yes. Could you just mention that thing again for my own, so I can go and have a look at that? The explosion and Mars's volcanoes.
Yes. There was something I read. I can't remember a lot about it, but it was about when there were exploding bombs here, and I presume it was at a time when they'd said stop exploding bombs, so they started doing it underground, and I can't remember when that was. And the volcanoes on Mars were erupting. They found that as an effect. So don't quote me on that exactly. I'll have to go and look that up and qualify that. Yeah.
Yeah. As an effect, like a systemic effect as a result of the explosion.
That's what it was being put down to. Yeah.
Wow, I'll have to read up on that. That's really interesting. Yeah, of course. And I think like Sorry.
I was going to say I didn't even know we had the capability at the time to know that.
Yeah, certainly. What year would that have been, like in the?
Ooh. Look, I read about it in the early 90s, but I don't know when it actually was happening.
Yeah. I think we would be naive, by and large, to assume that. Well, I mean, like the big events here, if you have an atomic bomb exploding, it may be our total understanding of how it could have implications elsewhere, even like great distances like Mars or something like that. But I mean, yeah, I think it's a hard thing to test as well if they decide to just keep do another 100 tests and really make sure that things are happening elsewhere. But yeah, I think we'd be naive to say, oh no, that's impossible to have no consequences elsewhere. Thank you. So have you had any experiences yourself with phenomena or anything you'd like to share?
Sure, I have. Yeah.
Okay.
I've had 6 UFO sightings of things that I cannot explain.
Yeah.
And I've had a close encounter. I'm one of those unusual people who've had one encounter. And it was, that encounter occurred in around 1990, 91.
Mm-hmm.
I'm unsure of the exact date. And I was asleep in my bed. It was early hours of the morning. It was still dark. Between myself and the window was about a metre gap, and the curtains of the window were open, and the street light outside was shining light in through the window. And I woke up and I saw these 3 small beings standing next to the bed. And they were the typical, what they call greys, with the inverted pear-shaped heads. They were only about somewhere between 3 and 4 feet tall, 3.5 feet tall, maybe. And I couldn't see their faces properly because they were silhouetted against the light. But they were certainly emaciated, very thin, no muscles at all that I could see, noticed. But I somehow have this strange memory, and I don't know how, if I couldn't see their faces, of these very big eyes that sort of, wrap around eyes. And I was terrified, absolutely terrified. And I just sort of woke up, saw them, and I'd been talking to people, not many then, not many at all. Because that was, I'd only been involved for 2 to 3 years in the organisation. I'd only just started going out into the field and doing investigations. But, and I'm just saying that because people will say, oh, you're just reflecting, what these people were telling you about their close encounters, and you're just making it up in your own mind, etc., etc. Well, that's a possibility, because I told myself it was a hallucination for 15 years. But then I just pulled the sheet up over my head and I started saying the Lord's Prayer, which I'd learned at Sunday school, but I'd forgotten that I still knew it. And it was like an automatic response. I didn't even think to say this prayer. It just happened. I don't know where it came from. It came within the depths of me somewhere. And the next memory I have is waking up in the morning, getting up, not having any memory of what was going on. Saying to my little girl at the time, and it was after lunch that something, and I'll be damned if I know what it was, but something triggered that memory, and it just flooded back in an instant. And I went, whoa, that's right, that happened. And I've since had quite a few thoughts about it. One main one is, how does a person go to sleep when they're terrified? The heart beating out of your chest, completely terror-struck to the core. But I went to sleep in that state. I don't know how that happened. So my ex-husband was in the bed at the time. He was had sleep problems, severe sleep problems, and I only had to breathe the wrong way, and he would be awake. Well, he didn't budge. And when I pulled that sheet up over my head, he should have woken up. No, nothing. So yeah, it was a very strange experience. I don't know what it was, what happened, but that's it.
And it was just them appearing in the room?
Yep, just standing there looking at me.
Do you remember waking up?
Yeah, I was
all?
awake because my eyes were open like saucers, at what I was seeing, just the terror of seeing something that was so not human. It's a very strange experience. I likened the terror to waking up and seeing a Bengal tiger with those big fangs, and just looking at you. What do you do? You
Yeah.
don't move.
Yeah.
You don't try and defend yourself, because the moment you move, that thing's on you. But I moved, pulled the sheet up over my head. I can't see it. I don't know why. I don't even know what I was thinking, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a very strange experience. And
Yeah.
I haven't had another experience since.
Yeah. That's bizarre. I mean,
Yeah.
um, did you ever? Do you know what prompted you to wake up? Like, what was the beginning of that? Because you were asleep when that happened. Okay.
Yeah. All I can put it down to is that proximity alert that which we have in our unconscious mind. That
Hmm.
something's there and you wake up.
Yeah.
Um, that's all I could. I was asleep and then I woke up. And I actually thought, why did I wake up? What woke me up? They didn't make any noise. There was no touching. There was no external stimulus to wake me up that I'm aware of, except perhaps to, hey, wake up so you can see us. That's all we need to do with you. I don't know. I really don't know. It's one of those things that rattles around inside of me from time to time.
Yeah. And um, c- can you recall it clearly?
Mm.
Yeah. Do you did they have any movement? Was there light in the room, or was it more of like a silhouette, or was there light like on them?
The light, that was a silhouette of their shape standing next to me. There were three of them. So they were lit up by backlighted by the street light outside. So it's
Yeah.
just like looking at black silhouettes. But strangely, I had this memory of their eyes. So I don't know how that fits together. Maybe something else went on. I don't know.
Hmm.
I really can't say. That was the only close encounter of that type that I am aware of. But with the 6 UFO sightings, and then a few years later, I had a near-death experience and an out-of-body experience, a very powerful out-of-body experience too. So, and I've since discovered that people who report close encounters also have those. They can have spontaneous mediumship start. They can see apparitions. They can see dead people. They become precognitive. They can become artistic. They, they can develop an interest in healing. It's
Hmm.
like that close encounter experience acts as a catalyst to potentiate themselves, who they really are inside, and bring it out, and catalyze those higher faculties that are extrasensory perception, precognition, those sorts of things. I've had many of people who report close encounters also tell me things like, I heard a voice tell me, pull over. So I pulled, it was so powerful, I pulled over.
Hmm.
And this huge truck went by. And if I'd stayed on the road going around this corner, it would have taken me out. Those sorts of things.
Hmm.
So what's really going on? I don't know. But it's very, very interesting.
Yeah, that's bizarre. Just yeah, I'm just want to focus on that experience for a little bit. If it's not distressing at all or anything
No,
like that.
yeah.
Okay. So there was no movement. Would you say the memory? How long? How long was the encounter? A few, like 10 seconds.
Oh, no, it would have been, well, it's hard to know precisely, but it would have
Mm,
been, yeah, it could have been up to 15 seconds, something like that. It was just the waking up, the eyes seeing these beings standing next to me, and just like, moments of, the mind computing, trying to understand what it's looking at, and going through the files of the unconscious, going, what is this? Flicking through, trying to
yeah,
match what you're seeing with, some sort of memory. There was none.
yeah.
And then it was long enough for me to start saying the Lord's Prayer in my mind. I didn't say it verbally, and then pull the sheet up slowly over my head. So yeah, it could have taken about 15 seconds.
Okay. And did you
I
ever?
wish to this day that I had reached out and knocked him over, because, you know, I'm 172 centimeters tall, and I'm not a petite woman. I'm not a big woman, but I'm not a petite woman. I'm very powerful.
Yeah.
And I could have just punched him out, but I didn't, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. No, try and not be hostile, but that's.
Oh, I just would have punched. Look,
I'm
very
just
true. I
joking.
don't care whether they're aliens or what. And
Yeah.
you know, and it was so against my character,
Yeah.
because my husband had travelled for years previously with his job. So
Hmm.
I'd be home this is before I had my daughter, with my two dogs, who were my guard dogs. I'd be home alone for weeks and weeks and weeks, 10 weeks one time. And, you know, I'm the type of person, if I'd hear a sound in the house that didn't belong, I was up and I was out in the kitchen and I was getting a knife, and I'm walking around the house with a knife in my hand, ready to attack an intruder. So that's
Yeah.
the sort of person that I was,
Yeah.
am, I suppose, a bit older now. But so why didn't I get up and just punch these things out? I don't know.
Mm. Yeah. And I guess why was it your response to just pull the bed sheet covers up? Like you're just as yeah. Did you ever question? I'm sure like people have asked you this hundreds of times, but did you ever question it was just a dream, or it was like sleep paralysis or something like that? I don't know if yeah.
It wasn't sleep paralysis. I could move because I did.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, was it a dream? Well, it wasn't a dream because I was awake. I knew I was awake, 100%. I knew I was awake. But that's why I told myself it was a hallucination for 15
Okay.
years
Yeah.
before I could come to terms and accept that now, by then, all the stories that I had heard from other people had happened to me. So, you know, people don't just come forward and tell you these stories. They've lived with them for years. So by the time they come forward and tell you, they can seem sometimes a little blasé about it because they've lived with it.
Yeah.
And that's why you've got to train your mind to just, you know, be receptive. Because if they do sound a bit blasé, which some do, some have,
Yeah.
you think, oh, they're just making this up. No, they've lived with it for a long time, and they've finally got to a point in their life where they want to talk about it.
Hmm. I mean, yeah, we could even liken it to the whole COVID response right now with people are already starting to act blasé about it. And I mean, it's a huge catastrophe worldwide. I mean, maybe not as startling as an experience like that, but yeah, how quickly some people can become blasé and just brush it off like, oh, it's nothing. Yeah, I mean, yeah, yeah, certainly. Um, and so yeah, going back to your UF, UFO, you've had 6, you said?
6 sightings, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, yeah, yeah, with the group that you work with, do you go out and look at all?
Yes,
Okay.
we have. Yep, we haven't this year. We tried to
Yeah.
at
Oh,
various
yeah.
times. What we actually did in about June, I think it was, we did the great backyard sky watch. So everyone went out, and this is when the restrictions were really clamped down.
Hmm.
We organised it online that everyone went out into their own backyard and watched the skies. And it happened to be a night that was freezing, the coldest night of the year,
Yeah.
if you remember that really cold night. And I lost my voice for 2 weeks after that. What was I thinking? But yeah, but we do. We tried to organise 3 last year from about September, but weather, then the bushfires, and because we're going out somewhere in the bush, so it was
Hmm.
unsafe to do that. We had to cancel 3 times, which was a shame. But before that, yeah, we've had sky watches and seen things, and that was one
Okay.
of those sightings that I had. Probably the most sensational
Yeah.
was also witnessed by 8 other people. So,
Okay.
and that was during a sky watch in '92. We had
Hmm.
organised to go out to Wivenhoe Dam,
Yeah.
and we camped there for the weekend, camped overnight. And when we do something like that, we create an all-night roster. So at that time, we had enough people to have 3 people on for 2 hours through the night, so that the sky was watched all night by someone.
Right.
And about 3 o'clock in the morning, the guys who were on then came running into camp and said, you know, we're seeing something. It's orange. It's high up in the sky. And when we look through binoculars, it's actually 3 objects together. So we thought, ooh. So they managed to wake up 8 of us, and we ran over. And I always like to make this point that we ran, where we were camped was here. I'm going to look at this camera. And there was sort of like a slight rise. And then on the other side, it came down to the waterfront. So I'm running over the rise with a video camera, which turns out it wouldn't work then.
Oh.
Remember, this is a video camera with one of those old videos that you actually put in it. Worked fine before this, didn't work at the time. Anyway, and I ran over, and as I'm coming over the crest of the small hill, the first thing I see is looking down at the water, and I see the reflections of these 3 orange objects on the water. And then I look up and I see them above. And they were about, I never quite get the distances right, but maybe 200 to 300 meters off the shoreline.
Okay.
They were a football shape on their side like this.
Yeah.
And they were the color of a burnt ember. So if you blew on the ember and get that orange glow, that's what the color of them they were. They were self-illuminated. They didn't create any, well, they were self-illuminated. Let's just leave it at that. We couldn't see any trails, nothing like that. There was no greater emanation around them. They were just orange glowing objects. And when we're standing on the shoreline and all of us are looking at them, they're silent, they're moving slowly. One then took off very slowly and disappeared into the dark of the night. Another one just went out like that. And another one moved across the water to the other point of land directly opposite us and came down. So some of the guys got in their car and they raced around there to see if they could see anything, because we're thinking, some of them were thinking hoax device. So they're thinking, okay, this could be a problem. It could be fire coming down in the trees. It could be anything. And they're looking around, they couldn't see anything. Then they came back the next morning. They went around again in the daylight, couldn't see anything. No burnt trees, nothing on the ground, no evidence of a hoax device anywhere hanging in the trees or on the ground. So we don't know what that was. And what was more interesting was the response of the people, all the different responses of the people who were there. You know, some are running around saying, it has to be a hoax. Others are going, oh, they listened to our thoughts that we had the week before about, you know, coming out and meeting us before we got here. Others was, you know, like a CE5, you know, calling down the craft, which wasn't called a CE5 then. And, you know, and others saying, oh, this is a message, this is something. Like, people were affected in so many different ways. It was really quite interesting to observe all the different responses from individuals. So I can imagine how the authorities would have their hands full if and why they've been putting off disclosure for such a long time, because there would be so many different responses by the public. There's been so many different responses to COVID, you know, let alone aliens on the planet. And which has torn communities apart, by the way. I have to say, all those responses to COVID, you know, people have picked sides and changed directions and gotten rid of friends. And can you imagine if it was aliens? You know, I just often say that there would be, it would be anarchy, because you'd get people walking around with weapons because they thought that person's an alien. Truly, you know, they'd be saying, that's the person that I work with, I reckon they're an alien. That person in my street, they're so strange, I reckon they must be an alien. And it could be a real problem. How do you get that in that hand, you know? Yeah. So, that's something to chew on for a while.
That's crazy. how long were they there when you ran over towards them?
Yeah,
Yeah,
minutes, minutes. We got
minutes.
a good look at them. Yeah.
Yeah. And were they all similar in size? Like
Yep. Same size.
you'd say identical? Like,
Yeah, you could say that. Yeah.
okay. And sorry, did you say they're like 200 meters up, something like that?
No, away from us.
Oh, wait. Okay. Yeah.
From us. Yeah, they were high up in the sky when they were first seen, way up.
Hmm.
And that's why the guys were looking at them through binoculars.
Yeah,
And
like a
that's when they
plane
realized. That's
or
when they
higher.
realized it
Yeah.
wasn't one; it was three. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Oh, so yeah, quite the high up then, if you can't distinguish
Yeah.
one. Yeah. Okay. And hmm, yeah, when they went to go investigate the like they drove over to it. Did they was it already at the location and they couldn't? It was out of sight when they started driving to it. It's not like they followed it. It was just already.
No. It
Yeah.
was. We watched it to see where it would come down, and that's when they said, "Okay, we've seen it. Now we'll go and drive around."
Oh
Mm.
right. Okay. That's yeah. When you go out to have these the sky watches, when you're observing the sky, I mean, is you can only really cover like I don't know 160 degrees or so of vision, but or are people like laying on their back to like get the whole? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
We would always pick locations which had as wide a view as possible. And out at out at Wivenhoe Dam, you can
Yeah.
get a 360-degree view from the point that goes out into the water of the camping area there.
Okay.
So yeah, it's a very good wide open sky. We'd been
Yeah.
to other dams and locations out near Warwick. Where there's we're almost a 360-degree view.
Okay. Yeah. That's And you said that was in '92, the
Mm.
Skywatch. Um, is there anything? I mean, even now, people would struggle to say it was something a weather balloon. No, I'm just joking. Like is there anything that you thought? Oh, it was just an orb. Like it was just a sphere. Did it look three dimensional? Like
Yes.
was
Yep.
was it a light like you'd see a headlight where it's like cut off, or was it like sort of a gradient taper to the atmosphere around it?
Um, no, it was the football shape,
Oh,
not
okay.
coming to a point. Yeah, it was a football shape,
Yeah.
but it wasn't coming to a point. It had the rounded end like a football shape,
Okay.
and there's three of them, remember?
Yeah.
It was self-illuminated.
Yeah.
So it wasn't being illuminated by moonlight or anything like that.
Hmm.
And they were orange. Remember, they were glowing
Yeah.
orange.
Yeah.
Um, I remember them having distinct outlines, but being self-illuminated, there might have been, and I'm just guessing now, but there might have been the very slightest glow around the edge. But I'm just guessing at that now because what I'm remembering in my mind is that they were these three football-shaped objects, and at that distance,
Hmm.
I think they probably were about I don't know 2 meters in diameter.
Oh,
From the
okay.
end of the football to the end of the football.
Oh,
Yeah,
right. Okay.
because remember they're a couple of 100 meters away, so
Hmm.
by the time you get up close to them, they're about 2 meters in diameter.
Okay. Yeah. So not big things. I
No.
mean.
So if anything, if they were extraterrestrial, they may have been probes,
Mm,
scouts, that sort of thing. And we kept I can't remember now. I'm just trying to think. We didn't spread the location around to a lot of people, at least not publicly, only to our members,
mhm.
because they're the ones that we thought would be going.
Yeah.
So, could it have been a hoax? Well, it was a really good one, if it was. And we didn't find evidence of what created it on the other point,
Mhm.
What it was, I don't know, but they were certainly UFOs.
Yeah. Yeah. Were you scared or were you
Oh,
excited? Was
I was
this your
awestruck.
first, was this like your first observation? I should have
No,
asked. Okay.
no, no,
Okay.
no. But it's probably the best or the
Yeah.
most profound. Because we had so many witnesses, that was the great thing about it. It wasn't just me seeing it by myself. So that was really good corroboration.
Hmm.
And people, we went off and I think we wrote down and sketched what we saw individually. And it was all very similar. And I think we sketched it. I can't quite remember now. Yeah, no, but it was a very good sighting. Mm.
Yeah. Um, that's unfortunate. There was one camera, so that I don't know. I know cameras are expensive today, so let alone in '92. But and to have a video camera, I know mum and dad still have one, but yeah, they were funny things. But yeah, that's always something that people will bring up. Oh, what if you had a picture of it? But is that when you go out now, do people just run a recording like 24/7? Because I can't imagine like going back and watching it, because it would take up your whole life if you have to sit there and go through 12 hours of footage, and
Yes.
you'd be doing that day to
It's,
day for your life if you're going to, and even to
yeah.
capture it at a resolution, like, yeah, it's just there's a few issues.
Well, yeah, for now we've just last year, hang on, earlier this year,
Hmm.
the group bought a Psionics night vision camera. So
Okay.
as soon as we get the chance to get out and use that, we will,
Right.
and go on a Skywatch. Yeah, but we weren't running in those days. We weren't running cameras all the time because basically people didn't have them. They were
Mm-hmm.
very expensive. The one I had was actually borrowed from my father-in-law. And the batteries were full, they were fine, it was working in the afternoon, and then, that night, didn't work. But, that's very typical of what happens when you're with technology around UFOs, isn't it? So what we did have was we had, don't think we had a laser. We had that's right, we had a high-powered light. It wasn't a laser that we could shine into the sky. I can't even remember what type it was, but it would create a beam.
Right.
And we also had 3 cat's eye mirrors.
Oh,
And by
what's
that I
that?
mean, well,
Yeah.
it's like an inverted pyramid shape, except there were only 3 sides to it. And it
Hmm.
was mirrored on the inside. And they were connected to some of those star picket fence posts. So that basically you've got a metal post with this inverted pyramid-like shape, which is mirrored on the inside. And we had 3 of them. Actually had a few staked around the area so that if anything went over us and it was emitting light below, the light would be reflected immediately back from the mirror, and they would know that we were there. That was another way of trying to make contact, or
Wow.
signal, I should say.
Yeah.
In those days, we also did our own experiments. We filmed this one. Because there were a lot of people were saying, "Oh, these are all hoaxes, etc." And we wanted to see what a hoax looked like in the sky above Wivenhoe Dam.
Yeah.
So I bought one of those really big helium balloons and filled that up and tied those camping sticks that you crack them and they glow in the dark. We
Yeah.
had one of those, hung it underneath, and we let it go on a tether and went up hundreds of meters, and it didn't look like any UFOs that we'd ever seen reported. It actually looked like a hoax. So
Yeah.
yeah, so we did all those sorts of things in those days, and just to convince ourselves and to educate ourselves about what we thought we were seeing in the sky.
Yeah. Do you think that a weather balloon could ever be mistaken for the commonly reported things? Like, I mean, if you put a very bright light inside of Or no, actually, maybe you speak more about other hoax devices. Have you ever come across any?
I haven't personally, but certainly people tried to make those Chinese lantern style
Mm,
devices with the garbage bags and the little container underneath what you put the little candle on.
yeah.
Um, and that's about all. But one of our team now, who was an independent researcher back then, and when he moved up to Queensland, he said that, and joined our group, he said that he was watching, he was monitoring UFO activity in the skies above Grafton, and he was saying that he noticed at the same time, from his perspective, that there was an increase in hoax device activities too, and
Okay.
he felt that that these hoax devices were actually let off by the military to confuse or to cover up real, genuine UFO activity.
Hmm.
So, let's get it lost in the noise, that sort of idea,
Yeah.
the hoax devices. And I think that's a real possibility that could have happened. So, and he did find a hoax device on the ground at one stage. So it was certainly going on. Trying to differentiate between genuine and what was sort of like a blanket
Yeah.
hoax through the whole thing is a bit difficult.
Yeah. Did he happen to tell you what the hoax was made of? Was it so that, like, did he know it came from military? Like it was a government
Um,
made hoax or something? Like,
well, he did say that the wire that was used wasn't sold in the town,
okay.
and it was a special sort of wire. I can't quite remember at the moment, but he had other experiences. He was an independent researcher based in Grafton, and he was taking UFO reports at the time.
Hmm.
And one day he told me the story that he found a bullet, a military bullet, stamped
Mm.
military, um, on his pavement outside his house, on his driveway. So he rang the police. They came out. Do you have a gun? He said, well, no. Um, and it certainly doesn't take military bullets,
Yeah.
So he felt that was a threat because he was gathering reports from the public. At the time, he was the only researcher one of the very, very few researchers in Australia who had a website
Okay.
and was putting a lot of information out. He was
Hmm.
also exchanging video footage with two other American researchers who were gathering UFO footage as well, and they were exchanging it between countries. So he was quite well known in Australia at the time, and he just felt that was some sort of intimidation, that he would
Okay.
find that military bullet,
Yeah.
or bullet
Was
from a
it
military weapon on his
was it
driveway.
discharged? Was it like
I
non?
can't remember now.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
can't quite remember. Probably. I can't remember.
Okay. I
Oh,
thought
maybe
maybe it
not.
was a
No, maybe
loaded.
not. I
Mm.
don't know. It was
Okay.
just the bullet. Yeah.
Not that it really means. I just, yeah, it's bizarre. And there were no like testing facilities near Grafton. Like, I'm,
Um, Look, I can't remember. We must get him on your show and get him to tell the story.
yeah. Oh, that'd be great. Is he still? He's still with us?
Yes.
Oh, great. Oh, awesome. That's yeah, certainly. That's so bizarre. Um, I just sort of, okay, okay. So, the other encounters that you've had, would you say that that is the most significant one? Going back to the three orange orbs over,
Yes.
yeah, yeah, okay.
Well, there was one other one that I saw a white luminescent globe off the side of the road as we were driving along in those days, um, going from south to north over the Gateway Bridge in Brisbane.
Okay.
Now, in those days, on the left-hand side of the bridge before you went over from the south to the north, it was just bushland.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a very drizzly night. It was completely overcast right over Brisbane. We were going to visit someone and I was a passenger. And I'd sort of gotten lulled into an altered state of consciousness with the windscreen wipers going like this, and I wasn't the driver, so I could just let my mind roam off. And I casually looked to the side and I saw off the side of the road about maybe 300 meters in off the side of the road, I saw this white luminous globe which looked like the full moon. And my mind went, oh, there's the full moon. And we kept on driving. And it wasn't until later that I was talking to someone and they said, well, you couldn't see the full moon at eye level off the side of the road. And by the way, I've gone back and checked the time that you actually had that experience. There was no full moon that night. And then when I thought about it, I thought, well, actually, you wouldn't have never seen the moon because it was completely black cloud right across, very low cloud right all over Brisbane that particular night. Mm-hmm. So that's always been a strange one for me. I wouldn't say it's significant, but I would say that it's unusual, and I don't think I can explain it.
Yeah, that's So you were going over the bridge, was it?
Just as we were approaching the bridge.
Yeah, right. Okay. And I mean, was this also back around 92?
Oh, could have been earlier. Earlier. Yeah, I think it was.
Yeah. And was it, were there any other features to it? Was it moving or was it? No,
it was stationary, but it had that beautiful luminescence of like the full moon. Mm-hmm. And it was just like a pearl of white in the bushland. And I'm thinking, I still think back to that now and I think, well, how can I explain that? Because there was nothing there. There were no buildings, no houses, nothing. And the way that it was lit, that was not a reflection. It was too beautiful, too perfect, and too luminous to be a reflection, And very, very specific edging to it. So,
spherical.
I don't know.
Yeah. And was it behind the tree line, the bush, or was it in front of it, or
I saw the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm thinking back. It was like there was short shrubs or short trees. I don't know. There may have only been about 4 meters high, something like that, and they were shrubby. And this thing was in amongst them, but it wasn't covered by the trees. Yeah.
Oh, okay. And I mean, even today, I don't know what you do. Like, what else could it be? I mean, you don't think it could just be a light, or I don't see a purpose for that, but like a light just being that big there, but nothing else that you can think of that it could be?
No, it was the light itself. It was, it was self-illuminated.
Yeah.
So that's why I say it wasn't a reflection. I wasn't, it wasn't like creating starbursts off it or anything like that. It was a very self-contained, illuminated object.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, was the landscape around it illuminated?
No, that was the other strange thing. So you would, if it was a light, you would expect you'd see shadows and all sorts of things, and the top of the grass around it, the scrub, etc. It'd all be lit up, but it wasn't. It was just this object.
Okay, so it was nighttime, like it was like 7 o'clock, like it was, and it was
probably was around 7. Yeah,
like it was well into night. It wasn't like dusk in summer or something. Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you like, and how far away were you? Do you think like half a kilometre?
Well, that's what I said. I think it was about maybe 300 meters away from the side of the road into this bushland. Yeah.
And
So when I say bushland, you know, it was like long grass for a certain distance, and then there were these bushes off in the distance, and it was in there.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, that seems like reasonable if it wasn't like self-illuminating, but not so bright that it's casting light everywhere. Or did it seem bizarre that it was like very bright and there should have been shadows and other features?
Well, you know, I've had to reflect on this because at the time my mind went, there's the full moon.
Yeah,
And we just kept on driving, you know, like my mind had filed it away, you know,
yeah.
it wasn't going to lift the lid on that. I mean,
That
if you're in your normal state of awareness, you'd say, pull the car over. What is that? You know, but
yeah,
I
of course.
I didn't
Okay.
even mention it to my husband at the time, not till ages later.
Yeah, that's interesting. So you've had a few experiences. Do you think people, I don't know, I wouldn't know, but like people that have had experiences become more prone to them, just like people that report encounters sometimes they report more. Do you think it's just a matter of like sometimes people win the lottery twice? I mean, there is just chance. You can't predict either of them, like when you're going to see a UFO. But do you think there is a pattern that some people are just, I don't know, they're more prone to being in the vicinity, like they're, yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I think there is an encounter-prone personality type in society. Now, what does
Okay.
that mean? I don't know what that means exactly, but it's after all these years of listening to people's stories, and some of them I spend quite a bit of time with, not just on the phone for a couple of hours, but, you know, I will see them half a dozen times, you know, at meetings. I'd meet with them face to face. They'd come to the support group, etc. And over time, they tell other stories about themselves. And this is what I was saying earlier, that, you know, people who report close encounters typically, you know, have multiple sightings in their life. And they have all these other strange, anomalous experiences, poltergeist activity, you know, and precognition and creativity and all that sort of stuff, and engage their paranormal abilities. And they're the types of people, and highly creative people. We used to have a radio show for years called the Paranormal Panel. I started on it in the early days, and then one of our team members continued on with that. He was on it for 17 years, a weekly show on Radio 4BC, on commercial radio. And I said to him one time, you know, and I was telling him about my theory about these encounter-prone personality types who are predisposed to having close encounters. And I said, and they are typically very creative. That's what I had noticed from the people that I'd been interviewing. So on the Paranormal Panel, because it was also a talkback show, so people would call in with their own experiences. And our team member had said to the host at the time, my theory. So they started testing it with people who called in. And they found, when they asked them, what do they do in their spare time, that they would say things like, oh, I write music, I play guitar, I paint, I sculpt, I sing, I perform, I do all this sort of stuff. So they're really creative people. So, you know, that was not a well-documented study, of course, but that anecdotal information backed up my own observations, my observational study research of people who'd been contacting me.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit? Just, is that an issue that, the creative mind, maybe it wonders?
Well, yeah, sure. It's something that people would think about, particularly skeptics. They'd say, oh, well, if they're highly creative, they're just imaginative. They're imagining things, you know. And sure, some people can imagine things, yeah. But they usually don't imagine it for such a long period of time. and they and imagination changes over time. So as they tell their story, they will introduce new elements, whereas these people don't. They stick to the story. And I've known people for over 30 years who've told the same story and they've not elaborated on it. Now, does that mean that they're not lying? No, it doesn't mean that. But you've got to, there's other things when you're looking at credibility. First of all, you've got to you've got to observe a person over a period of time, and which I have, and the types of people that report these experiences, and the circumstances in which they report them, and what they report. That all comes into play as well. So, and that's to get a credibility factor going for you is something that can only happen after looking into the subject and knowing the telltale signs of people who report these things.
Yeah.
And what you've come to understand is a genuine experience. And then you've got to look at the credibility of the person. Have they, you know, is there an ego at play here? Is there something else going on for this person? This is only stuff that you can have experience with that person face to face over time. And that's not to say that I have, you know, I've gotten off the phone, I've listened to someone for a couple of hours and I thought, wow, that is just such a strangest story I've ever heard. Did I disbelieve them? Maybe initially, but I just put it on the back burner and I listened to their story. That's what we do, is we take down what they tell us. They're telling us something and we record it. And then after that, we have to think, well, how does this fit in with what I know? Are there loose ends here? Is there room for something new to be emerging in the phenomenon? There's always that aspect too. So there's a lot to take on board when you're in the credibility factor of a witness.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's almost just like the social scapegoat solution to, oh, it was a hot weather, no, what is it? A weather balloon. And they can just say, oh, well, you know, they're inclined to be creative, or maybe it's just like the scapegoat that other people might project. I don't know, the skeptics. I mean, I'm obviously skeptical. I've never experienced anything. I'm just, curious to understand people's own experiences.
I think by now some people watching this, hopefully, have watched the Unidentified series with Lou Elizondo and Chris Mellon and Tom DeLonge, and that series, if you can watch it, Unidentified, I think it's called. Yep, watch it. It's on, I think it's on YouTube somewhere, or it has been online somewhere. It's been on TV, that's for sure. Maybe on the History Channel. And yeah, sure, you can discard a lot of things if you want to, if you're that way inclined. But it's really hard to discard when Air Force pilots film something that is unexplainable.
Yeah.
You cannot discard that. And now, even though there was a UFO task force initially prior to this, which was then supposedly disbanded, the Pentagon has now come out and said that they have created another task force that is looking into UFOs.
Yeah.
So, yeah, sure, go and discard the hundreds of thousands of reports from people, you know, since God knows when. But you cannot discard reports from pilots, particularly military pilots, from astronauts, from other credible people, perhaps police, in some cases, people who are trained to look at things in a more rational manner, perhaps, and in a more objective manner. That's what I'm trying to say. And go, okay, what is this? You know, what's going on here? So yeah, let's see people just get rid of that and just wipe the table clean with all those reports.
Oh, of course. Like, even if you discredited all the ones that you were skeptical on, I mean, there's going to be some that remain. So then there's that to be discussed anyway. But
Mm.
yeah, that's really interesting. I'd like to just get going back to you were talking about the government and how they renamed like a group that was into researching the unidentified stuff. But do you find that the wording around the literature has changed? Like with documents, we now see it's UAVs with unidentified aerial phenomena. Do you find that makes it hard to, yeah.
It's very annoying, actually.
Mm.
It's a diffusing of the subject.
Hmm.
And I think that's, and some researchers, choose to go on to go along with the UAP idea.
Yeah.
I think UFOs gets lost in that. Maybe they're trying to get away from aliens. I don't know. What are they doing in the UFO field in the first place if they are? So
Hmm.
no, I much prefer to use the acronym UFO because it is an
Uh-huh.
unidentified flying object.
Yeah.
Unusual aerial phenomenon that can include all sorts of things like sprites and sheet lightning and atmospheric flashes, and that's not what we're about. We're here about aliens. We're here about extraterrestrial life in the universe.
Yeah, yeah, certainly. And oh, I know maybe I misspoke. I know UAP is one of them, but then also UAV, unidentified aerial vehicle. I
Yep,
mean,
yep.
but certainly, yeah, diffusing the usable search terms for what you might retrieve, or yeah, not even that you have access to like a government database, but then when they do publish something, it's not as apparent. It is what you're looking for. So I don't know if you've heard about the Bob Lazar case. I'm sure you have. But yeah, I just wanted to know what do you think of that, and if you, yeah, what you think of it.
Yeah. I lived through the first round of Bob Lazar
Huh?
when he was younger, and I was watching him when he was younger and when he first came out about it. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's a very interesting case. There's been a lot of attempts to debunk him.
Hmm.
And the idea of extraterrestrial vehicles in Area 51. And yeah, sure, I have no problem with that. I think it's highly likely. I know one particular researcher, Stanton Friedman, didn't believe him because he couldn't find any evidence of Lazar having gone to a particular university.
Yeah.
Records can be wiped.
Yeah.
So
Certainly.
I say good on him for speaking out. I wish more people would have spoken out over the years about what they've been privy to. Even though they're in so-called maybe top secret situations, and it's time for the public to know what's actually going on. This whole cover-up has just got to go. It's time for it's over. It's
Hmm.
time to move on from that and let people know what's really going on. It's our right to know what's going on the planet, So, yeah, anyone out there's got information, come forward, tell us.
Yeah. Certainly. And tying into that, what do you make of the Pentagon's release of crafts were recovered that were not of this world, as their quote? I mean, do you think that is just a play on words, which is not awfully specific, but it's mysterious enough that it lets people sort of think about it for a bit?
So are you talking about the uh, the metal fragments? Is that what you're talking about?
I'm talking about there was a statement released by the Pentagon in July, um, which like the major headline from it was they said, I don't know if it was, maybe you've read more than I have if it was the metal fragments, but all I took from it was they just stated, yeah, vehicles were recovered not of this world.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, what do I make of that?
Yeah.
Well, I'm surprised that
Yeah.
they would actually say that. But I think if they had, when they did, because there's a move towards disclosure. I think
Okay.
that's what that. I
Okay.
from what I've heard over the years, that there are different ideas in the secret government, if you could say it that way, about whether the public should have information or they should not have information. Should it remain covered up or should it be released? And there are various, a couple of different factions who disagree. And some are working for disclosure and some are working against disclosure. So what does that mean? Well, you know, that's their role to figure that out. We can only do what we can do at our grassroots level. But I'm hopeful about what that might mean.
Yeah.
I think we're living in a time when there's so much being revealed, particularly through this whole COVID crisis, for goodness sake. But from that, it's going to be a full, you know, rip the blinders off the public and show them what's really going on in the world in so many different areas. And that's not going to be easy for some people. That's going to be a big pill to swallow. They're going to say, no, that's not right. And they're going to say, oh, that's lies. Because now we can't trust anybody, can we? We don't trust the media. We don't trust the government. We don't trust anything anyone says to us if we're a thinking person. So, you know, where do we go from there? Where do we go from there? I don't know. It's, again, there's so many question marks about everything, you know, about the UFO subject and about the cover up. And now the Pentagon's come out and, you know, officially released the footage of the Tic Tac UFOs.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
All of that. Yeah, something's going on. What's going on though is the big question, but something's moving.
Because when you think about it, like, I mean, it seems like there is efforts that they've been trying to cover up things, like be it whatever it is, but then to go and actually allude to the fact with like certain wording, like specific wording, like it's not a mistake saying, oh, it's not of this world. Like it really lets the imagination, like they obviously they know what they're doing, but yeah, exactly. Like why now? Do you think that, I don't know if there's a protocol around how long they can hold documents and information and before they have to release it. I really should familiarize myself with that, but I don't see why they would just be like, oh, 10 years is up, we have to release the footage now. We said in this private contract that no one knows about. Like, who are they really being, like, how are they being held accountable to release footage or information by a certain time? Don't you think that they are just sort of making us take baby steps towards normalizing it, just slowly, just entertaining the idea?
I think so. But other people in the public and researchers, I should say, UFO researchers, want it to happen a lot faster. And so the whole, you know, the stuff that came out in the Washington Post, the New York Times, etc., that was orchestrated, which started last year in, oh gosh, when was it? Last year sometime, where the story came out in both those papers at the same time about this Pentagon task force. And so researchers themselves in certain situations are trying to speed up this, the releasing, the pullback of this cover up. And, you know, it's time. And I hope they do it. I'm not sure how it's going to go because we had the Disclosure Project in 2001 with Dr. Stephen Greer at the Washington Press Club, and he gathered all these witnesses, their video testimony. 20 of them turned up at the press club that day, and there was like 200 reporters in the room, and it made the newspapers in the United States. I think we might have seen one very brief story about military witnesses coming forward in the Australian news for like a minute, 30 seconds or something, maybe 15 seconds. on the 6 o'clock news one night. This is going back in 2001. So, and this is a problem, that the media can contain information within a country. You know, it can, and this is the problem we've got now in Australia with Rupert Murdoch owning, you know, controlling the media here. So it's so much easier now to keep information contained, and so that independent media don't get it out. But I'm so glad that there are independents like Sky News in Australia that will release information, and even, dare I say it, even Fox News. But with Tucker Carlson in the United States, he's very good. I really like what he says and how he gets people into the studio or interviews them about the UFO subject. He's not worried about going there and getting them to speak out about it. And he presents it in such a way that is so credible because of the choice of witnesses that he has too. So, you know, there's hope for the future that eventually this snowball of the recent attempts at disclosure will continue.
Okay. And do you think they've been holding off for so long because it would just disrupt society? I mean, there'd be no real I don't know, it would change things up a lot, because people would know there's a lot more out there. They'd be less inclined to, would they be more inclined to not work for a government because there's bigger players, and there's people would be interested in things that don't directly benefit the government. They'd be interested in how can something higher intelligence, how can it help them? It would sort of dissolve the government's abilities to control people. Do you think that's why they've held off?
I think that the authorities are worried about the fear factor. I think that a few things actually. First of all, if there was disclosure, that means that people would be answerable to the cover-up. Okay. Why have you been covering it up? What have you been covering up? What else aren't you telling us? All those sorts of questions, right?
Yeah.
But then you've got the fear factor from the public. The people here who would say, we don't want aliens here. Where's our military forces? Get rid of them. And what do you say? Sorry, we can't, you know? And how impotent does that make your armed forces and your government? How does that, they can't portray themselves like that. They won't portray themselves like that. So we've still got quite a way to go in regard to disclosure, for sure. And I always say to people, until it becomes an issue on a ballot paper, forget it. The people have to want it. I think the people have to want it. They have to demand it, that they know about what's going on in regard to extraterrestrials coming to planet Earth. And in some cases, as we've seen, they might say those alien abductions might have been real. And what the hell does that mean for the rest of us? And are they still here, but now in hiding? That stirs up a lot of fear.
Yes, yeah, I can't imagine. Well, I think it's been long enough. I'll leave it at that. It's been great having you on, and thank you so much for being my first guest, Sheryl.
You're very welcome. I'm a first guest on a lot of podcasts.
Yeah, very, very interesting. It's been great. I really learned a lot. So thank you, and goodbye, everyone.
Bye.